You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
Let's start understanding more about the struggle of parenting and the potential of abuse. And with us today is Justyn, who is from the community-based child abuse prevention. Did I say that right this time?
Yes.
Awesome. And so we wanted to invite you in and just have some talks about the struggles that you see and ways that parents can get help, and just kind of an education about your program. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I graduated from New Mexico State University in 1995 with a degree in social work, and I worked for Child Protective Services for 16 years. I supervised investigations for 9, and about 4 years ago, I decided to move over to another agency called Abandonamos, and it's funded through the state of New Mexico Child Protective Services, but it's a prevention program. So I'm now on the other side trying to help empower parents and give them the tools necessary to prevent.
And so what do you see the most of when you're out in the community or when you're dealing with people coming through your doors?
Being in New Mexico, I see a lot of poverty. I see a lot of parents that don't have a lot of support system, limited resources, a lot of individuals that are struggling with substance abuse, domestic violence, and I think one of the biggest problems is asking for help and acknowledging that, we're all in this together and we need to help, seek solutions and strengthen families. My philosophy is to take all the good stuff and make it better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I love how you say we're all in this together, because we really are. I mean, we're a community. We live together. We shop together. Everything we do is together. And I feel like at times it's kind of this, well, you're on that side and I'm on this side. And I think when we talk about abuse, people become very defensive. We were talking about before this started, just a little bit about, nobody wants to be considered an abuser.
Right.
And we were talking about the stigma behind the name of the program. And so what would you tell somebody who is listening to this, who needs help, but maybe they're struggling with addiction and they just don't know how to ask, or they're afraid if they did ask that would get the state involved and start looking into their circumstances and potentially removing their kids?
Right. So what I try to do when I meet with families is explain to them that I'm there to help them, that what I want to do is get a baseline for what is going on in the family. And if they don't tell me what's happening, I can't help them. And so I identify right away that I personally don't like the name of my program. I understand nobody wants to be identified as a child abuser. Anybody in any moment can lose control. I mean, kids are stressful. Premature babies have a higher tendency of being abused because they're fussy, they're hard to console. And so what I try to do is just explain to families, I need to understand where you're coming from so that I can refer you to get the help that you need. And so if a parent tells me, they have a drug problem, we want to look at, what is the extent of the problem? How often do you use? Where are your children when you use? Is there somebody that you can safely place your children with when you're using? And how do we get that individual to a place where they're able to not use? And even having done child protective services, substance abuse in and of itself is not a reason to remove a child. Neither is a mental health diagnosis. If a parent has, schizophrenia, domestic violence in and of itself, what we try to do is teach parents the skills so that they can safely parent their children regardless of their issues, because some issues, are hard to treat and they take time. And so what we want to do is make sure that kids can be safely maintained with their families. And when they can't, how do we get the parents the help while we're at the same time keeping children safe?
Right. Yeah, one thing we talk about in here a lot is that people have seasons in their life that are hard.
Yes.
And reaching out to ask for help during those seasons. And so how can we break down those fears of just not asking for help?
Yes.
Because you said a lot of people just don't reach out for help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there are a lot of community resources. I think most people have the misconception that Child Protective Services is their primary function is to take away children. And having worked on that side, the primary goal is to keep kids safe in families. But I understand the fear. And so, there's a lot of programs, and I think that states are now putting more effort and time and money into prevention and early childhood intervention. And so what we want to do is take the stigma away and let parents know that, there are services and we can help and we want to help. But we have to kind of know what's going on to help. And so when I introduced myself, I explained that, I have a history with Child Protective Services, but my goal is to do prevention with families. And I want to meet clients where they're at. And like I said, build on all the good stuff and make it better. But I let families know immediately that if I ever have a concern about the safety of their child, they would be the first person to know that. And my primary goal is always to help make their child safe. I'm not there to investigate them. I'm not there to wreak havoc in their life. I'm there to help them be a resource so that, they develop the skills. And a lot of times for parents growing up in a home that maybe wasn't the healthiest or the happiest, and if there was substance abuse issues or domestic violence, that's all people know. Right. And I understand that. If you did not grow up in a nurturing, loving environment, you haven't gotten love. And if you haven't received the kind of parenting that was necessary to give that love, it's hard. And so I also tell parents, I believe in you. I know you can do this. Together we can do this. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of individuals, they don't have somebody that believes in them. They don't have somebody that tells them, you can do this. And, at the end of the day, I'll be there for you. And so I think just, having a support system is a big impact.
Huge.
Yeah.
It really is. That's why we have our parent education as well, because we see it. We see the lack of support. And I think about being a young mom, when I was struggling, I would not have had the courage to pick up the phone and ask somebody for help. But I was fortunate enough to have a family that was hands-on. And so my mom would see and just show up and be like, hey, how can I help?
Right.
So yeah, I think about those moms and dads that don't have that support system, that somebody's not seeing what they need and responding to those needs.
Right.
So you're doing your part. Then the other part is they have to find the courage.
Yes.
To pick up the phone or to walk through the doors and ask for help. And so when they do that, what's the process like?
So I'll receive a referral, and then I meet with the family and talk about a total assessment of, what is the primary stressors in the home, what are their coping skills, what resources do they currently have. A lot of times, families need food. This morning I delivered food to a family, dropped off information at Income Support Division. So a lot of what I do is hands-on with the family, but a lot of it's what happens behind the scenes. And so if you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, that's stressful.
Very stressful.
Very stressful. And, you just kind of see generational issues where things stay the same. And until somebody says, I want different and I need different and this, can be better, things stay the same. It's like doing the same thing and wanting a different result, but it has to come from a place of no shame, no blame, and understanding where people are at and having compassion. And I challenge all of my social work colleagues to, explain to clients when they meet with them, I'm not perfect. I have problems. Everybody does. But where do we get you? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are we going to get you there?
Yeah. And so it's self-driven, that motivation.
It has to be.
Do you feel like most people you encounter understand and grasp what you're trying to do? Or do you feel like it's more of a, okay, I have to go in and explain myself so that it creates that safe space so that you can go forward?
Right. It takes a while, I think, to build rapport and trust with people. And I think the name, of course, doesn't help, but it takes time. And one of the first things that I do is explain the program, and I tell people, think about it. You don't have to sign up today. Are you willing to make this commitment? Do you want the help? And then I ask them, what do you want help with? What do you think you need help with? Because they are the experts on their lives. And so I try to take away the stigma as much as possible. Within 30 days, we do a thorough assessment and come up with a treatment plan. And I almost think that's unfair because when you sit down with somebody in the first 2 weeks, they're not going to want to tell you what happened in their childhood. Right. They're not going to tell you if they had sexual trauma or abuse or if they're currently struggling with alcoholism. And so, I just try to build that rapport and let them know I'm here for you.
That's amazing.
Addressing some of the little things helps the big picture.
Right.
If a parent doesn't have diapers, how stressful is that? And you all help with that.
Yeah.
Clothes, education, all those things. And I think another thing that we need to focus on is that it's a team effort, but dads need to be more involved. And I think we put a lot of focus on moms. When a mother, isn't able to parent her child, we think, oh my gosh, how could she do that? But a lot of times in our society, we see men not being role models for their children and not bonding and connecting and attaching.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful that you all have this program where, men can come and learn how to be great dads through the Conscious Fathering program.
Yeah, they've got to be plugged in from the very beginning.
Yes.
It really is.
And our expectations need to be higher. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to, they're hearing this, they're interested in making that next step, like, okay, I do want better, but I just don't know how to get there. What would be their step? A phone number, an email? How would they reach out?
Sure, they could call Aprendamos at 575-526-6682. And then my email is the letter J, WRIGHT, @AITkids.com.
Awesome.
And then we also, through Aprendamos, have an early intervention program. And so that is for children from birth to age 3. And we provide a comprehensive assessment of child developmental needs, including, is there a need for physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy? We have a massage. And families that have a history with Child Protective Services automatically qualify for environmental risk. So if they may not qualify for my program and that the need is not as intensive, they would qualify for social work services, possibly through early intervention. And with that, the teams go into the home and they work with the parents to teach them how to meet the needs of the children.
So basically, if they call that number, Aprendamos will figure out how to get them plugged in, connected some way, somehow.
Yes,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And I love Aprendamos as far as early intervention. My son went through there. And so I think, we just kind of always associate like, oh, therapy, like, no. But once we realized what they did and how they did it, it was amazing. It was incredible to have them in my home. I learned so much from them. And my son just benefited immensely. So
they have great success stories. And they also offer family therapy, and they also collaborate and oversee. It's an umbrella of services. So there's also the Amistad counseling services, the autism program, and then there's also Esperanza that does the services for children over the age of 3. And so I think the community is really coming together and figuring out that, early childhood development is so important, but brain development in the first 3 years is really, where a lot of it happens.
Huge,
and
so much wiring.
Right. Yeah. And then also there's a lot of focus right now on ACEs, adverse childhood effects. And so what we're trying to do is, help parents understand that when parents were brought up in homes where there was a lot of trauma, and there was no treatment, a lot of times patterns repeat. And so depending on how many adverse childhood reactions you had as a child, it can impact, how you parent.
Yeah.
And brain development and trauma kind of rewires the brain.
So if you're listening to this podcast today and you're thinking, okay, I want to take the next step, I want to do better, listen again for those numbers that Justyn just gave you. Call Aprendamos. They will get you plugged in some way, somehow. If you don't have those numbers, you can always go on and call us as well. And thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Again, if you're listening to this, feel free to give Justyn a call, or if you are not in our area, feel free to reach out to the National Parent Hotline. You can go online at nationalparenthotline.org, or you can call 1-855-427-2736. They are a Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Organization. So there's also the Parental Stress Line. That's 1-800-632-8188. And the Parental Stress Line is actually available 24/7. You can call any day, anytime. And they also have it available in all languages. So thanks for listening today. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, leave us a review, give us some feedback. Is what we're putting out here helpful to the community? And then again, always keep in mind we are a nonprofit, so if you want to make a donation, we will gladly accept. And stars can't shine without darkness.